Welcome back. Now, the highly anticipated Bassline Fest 2023 is set to take place on the 20th of May and is a celebration of Africa Day. The final lineup is Pan-African and bedecked with South African stars. Let's bring in Brad Holmes, Bassline Festival organizer, to give us more insights on the event. Brad, thank you so much for joining us this evening. A very exciting lineup that's coming up on the 20th. Can you just take us through the concept of the Bassline Fest?
Good evening. Yeah, hi. So Bassline Fest it's about Africa Day. So we started doing Africa Day celebrations in 2004 in Newtown, and it's basically culminated over the last 19 years into a celebration of like proper diversity in Africa, because the Bassline venue itself, yes, in its day used to do all the African stars used to come through. So that's where my passion for it began. And so now we're simply following through with it. So what we try and do is make it diverse. So this year we obviously go with South African acts, and they're big. So we've got Shava, and he's as big as they can really get, yes, internationally. If you look at the amount of streaming that he's doing, he's competing with the best in the world. He's really quite something. So he's an exceptional talent. Yes. We've got Simi, who is the female artist. I think she's up for a Metro, yes, for Best Female Artist. And she, in 2-3 years' time, is going to be a big artist, I believe. We've got Durban Gogo, as you're well aware, doing all the Afro nations around the world, from Portugal to Miami. She's really cruising around, doing the Amapiano scene and giving it good justice. And then what we do is we have a partnership with Bushfire, which is a festival in Swaziland, ASGO, which is in Maputo, and Sakifa, which is in Reunion Island. And every year we have artists that we spot, because we go to conferences around the world, yes, and we put it into the talent bowl, and we put them forward. So this year we've got Afrotronics, which is a band from Chad, Canada. So they're Chadians, if that's such a word. They live in Canada, and they play a very interesting rock. So it's a troubadour, that blues rock that comes out of sort of West Africa, right, and they mix it with house music. Wow. So I've seen them twice. I saw them in Cape Verde, and I saw them now in Spain. And it's just really refreshing, interesting, young, talented kids from Chad that are doing stuff that's very cool. How much work goes into keeping the audiences on their toes and bringing in all this beautiful mixture of artists under one roof? It's damn hard. It's a challenge. But I mean, just to give you an idea, what we're doing is we've got like an act from Cape Verde. Yes. Okay. And they're doing punk, but they're fusing it with techno. Okay. So what it's showing is a complete diversity, right, of what young people are listening to, and it's what young people are, how they're expressing themselves. So I find that the most interesting part of doing what we're doing. So that's the fun part. Yes. The difficult part is getting the message to the audience, and getting them to buy into something that they don't know. But when they leave, they probably enjoy it the most. True. But that's what festivals are about. So it's about enticing them. It's about tapping into popular culture and trying to understand it as it moves, because we're in our third decade. So, so we try and work and understand it, and that we do by doing lots of research. And of course, with the research comes a lot of exchange in terms of conversations between the artists, talent development. How much of that happens behind the scenes so that it's beyond the music, but it's also about the development of some of these young artists like Simi? So an artist like Simi is a great example of somebody who So we booked her for the first time when we had Sun, our musician, and we put him with an orchestra last year, September. I'd heard of Simi, and Simi was on the lineup with Misaki and Ami. There's quite a few.
Right.
And Simi came on, and she had just something about her, you know. Then I saw her again, and she'd grown that much. So it's what I remembered. We had Misaki doing a Johnny Walker gig at the Bassline. They gave us like $5,000. We could like get a drum kit and a bass amp, whatever, together. And Misaki, she was still at varsity,
Yes.
and my wife was like, "Gee, that artist is amazing." And then we watched Misaki go like this, you know. And we just did a show with Misaki now in March, and she sold out in 2 days. You know, so that's the nice part. It's also I think the South African artist management and artist, I mean, Shav is a great example of good artist management.
Yes.
They've got a vision, they've got a plan. It's not like they're thinking about tomorrow, they're thinking years to come, and everything's thought out. So what that does is it gives the South African music industry as a whole much more longevity.
Of course.
And the fans get better music, the artists make better music, because the music industry, from a South African context, if you look at the Nigerian music industry, we're tiny compared to the Nigerian music industry.
Sure.
So this is how we grow our industry, we grow our artists, and we grow the practitioners that are involved in the development of the artists. And we also grow our identity. So Amapiano is a great example of our identity that's coming out. But the same would be for the Afro pop that's come out. Thandiswa Zwayo is a great example of somebody who's really got a fantastic South African identity. So the music industry is exciting. It has its moments, believe you me. But that's what I found great about, I've been sort of fortunate about, is I've watched it from '94 and gone through the process of jazz into hip-hop, into kwaito, into you know, and going through and just watching the industry grow. And that's what the most important thing is.
Speaking of that growth, how important are those collaborations across borders, across genres, amongst young artists and much older artists in understanding the artistry itself?
Well, I think that to a large extent you could use Yuma Sakela as a perfect example of somebody, you know, who takes his, when I think of him, I just smile, you know, because he's just somebody who really represented, he was socially conscious, musically is genius.
Yes.
But he always was working with young people. So it's for the older musicians to almost see it as a responsibility to be examples to the younger musicians. And then you was a great example of collaborating with the young musicians. So I mean, I think it was TKZ that he collaborated. He collaborated with so many,
of
the art. So I think that's really, really important. From an African perspective, you can see what's happening to a large extent. There's lots of stuff happening between the Nigerian music scene, which is massive. I mean, they've got a Afrobeat radio station in the UK now that just pumps out Afrobeat all day and all night. Yeah. So the Afrobeat scene is becoming like, you know, in 10 years' time we're going to be like R&B or rock.
Right.
Now you're going to have Afrobeat. You know what I mean? So that's super important for the growth of music in Africa.
COVID-19 happened 2-3 years ago. How much of an impact did that have on the festival, and what are some of the lessons that you learned as organizers going forward from that pandemic?
So that was probably the most difficult time we've had, and people in my industry who do live music specifically.
Yes.
So basically, I remember E was running an ad, and it said, "Phone Crime Stop if you see this," and there was people at a festival. Okay, so our jobs became a crime.
Sure.
So this is something you've been doing for 3 decades, and it's a crime, and everything's cancelled. So we had we carried on working, so we did what we called non-paid work. You know what I mean? So you can't like sit there and mope. So we devised that based on Busy Essentials. That we did loads of streaming. We kept ourselves busy.
Right.
But I think it had such a massive impact on the live music industry, and a lot of people didn't survive. I think besides what people have to say, I think the South African government did manage to actually support quite a lot of the artists. There were a couple of scandals in the mix while things were going on, but people were supported. You know, if we look at, how other, compared to how other countries were supported, we didn't actually do too badly. Yeah. But I mean, COVID-19, when I said to my son, you must do a must-have job, not a nice-to-have job. You must get your plumbing done. You must have a lawyer. It's nice to buy a ticket for a show.
That's true.
So, I mean, it really made me rethink a hell of a lot. But at the same time, we're out of it, and we're out of it stronger. And the industry is back, and it's strong, and it's pumping. So we'll be okay. But it was hard.
It was hard. And you're back strong. And being back strong, I just want you to speak to us to the economy around the festival. I mean, how many other people are benefiting in terms of the stalls and all the other activities that are happening around the festival?
So generally, we would employ about 500 people on a show like this. And we used to actually employ a hell of a lot more. So that would be artists, and then everybody associated with the artists themselves. So that would be the artist management, the artist agency, the publicists, the drivers, caterers. Then you're looking at stage, you're looking at technical, all the production team, that production assistant, stage management. There's quite a team that are involved there. You're looking at your bar staff, bar backers, barmen, bar management, your structures builders, and when you add everything up, you've got your stalls, you've got your vendors. So because we do, most importantly, get funding from the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, we have to make sure that everybody that works we get the names, IDs. So we've got a whole process that we do to make sure that we know exactly how many people were employed, what they did, how much they were paid, what their ID numbers are. So there's a whole little system that's in place, which is super, super important because it speaks to the greater economy of what we're doing. It's like in the States, the entertainment industry is huge, and I think South Africa's got the potential from an African perspective to be a big employment factor in training young people to follow their passions, because that's the big thing. So there is, when we do shows, there's lots of people that get employed, and it's the kind of thing, you want to do gigs. I knew I wanted to do gigs when I ended up at backstage when I was 19 years old at a gig. I think it was a Free People's concert. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I went and I liked the energy. Once you like that energy, you're in. You'll do whatever that's involved with that. So that's what it's about. Yeah.
Most certainly. In 10 seconds, Brad, on the 20th of May, what can people expect?
So the show starts at 2. It's going to end at 10. They can expect some really cool, diverse African music. And it's going to be 8 hours of it. And it's going to be a journey where you're going to go from dance hall to punk to rock to amapiano to dance, and Shaba speaks for himself. So that's a very varied, interesting day of excellence coming from you in Johannesburg.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening, Brad. We sure hope that those that will be in attendance are going to have that experience and certainly enjoy it.